What's going on, mere mortals? Welcome to another book review, and I hope you're having an amazing, fantastic day. And just want to thank you right at the start here for tuning in to another book review. If you do enjoy these, actually, if you could leave a comment on the YouTube channel if you're watching there, or if you're on iTunes, leaving a review on there would be absolutely fantastic. But other than that, I'm going to get straight into it. So today I have the book for you, The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Now, this book was published in 1920, and it was initially serialized in 4 parts, which is what occurred a lot with books in those days, before then being quickly published in the same year in 1920. This book won the 1921 Pulitzer Prize, so it was recognized very quickly on as being an important work, and was actually, a little fun fact here, she was the first female to actually win the Pulitzer Prize. And that sort of talks a little bit, I would guess, about what the book was with the themes regarding women and also the times they were living in regarding social class. So the book is set in the 1870s and is in the upper class of the New York scene in the Gilded Age. So this was the age where essentially America was prospering. People were coming over in droves, immigrating to America, and there was just this huge influx of wealth into the country. And so there was a sudden rise of the New York social scene, which compared itself to the European, so like the French aristocracy and things like that. So the book is mostly about the social interactions of these people and the love triangle between the 3 main characters, which is Newland Archer, and his soon-to-be wife, May Welland, and then her mysterious cousin, Ellen Olenska, or Countess Ellen. The book, I guess, revolves around these 3 and treats of Archer's discontentment with his own impending marriage and eventual marriage to May, who, while she is a great person, he doesn't feel that intense love. Whereas with Ellen, he gets this immediate reaction with her and this desire to be with her, but it also has to be tempered with his obligations to his family, his social class, her imminent divorce or potential divorce as well from her husband, and the implications that would arouse in the whole network of intermingling, almost incestuous family relations that they have. So that gets me right onto the themes of the book, and social class is the predominant one in this book. Almost all of the actions that are taken by characters are dictated based on the obligations that are inherent in their class. And I'll talk a little bit about the obligations in a second, but just because someone is of a certain social class really doesn't make them better or worse. And you can see this with many of the characters behaving in extremely ambiguous ways, in unethical ways, but there is this overriding feeling that we're of this class, we are the Archers, we are the Wellands, we don't behave in this way. And so you see in the book that many of the characters, I guess, try and like justify themselves and their family through, even though they're taking negative actions or behaving badly, they'll either just be like, well, no, but we don't really do these sorts of things, so therefore they don't exist in our class. And so it's just like the absurdity in covering up scandals. So, this lady's going to marry him, but her connection with this guy is a little bit dubious, and she was seen spotted. Her carriage was spotted outside of his place and it just goes on, and they get deep into these intricacies, and all their actions are dictated about, can I invite this person to this social gathering? Is this person acceptable, or have they're influenced with the whatever family of importance? That sort of means I need to invite them, but personally I don't really like them. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think what you just see in the book really is that people are people no matter what their upbringing. So you're going to have good people, you're going to have shit people, you're going to have people who are very introspective or who are mindless and just go through life, not second guessing any of their own actions, who don't have intense feelings, who are artistic, who aren't artistic, I think it's just really intriguing seeing that in this very stratified class where it really only treats of the higher class, the upper echelons. So we don't actually have really any reference to the people who are even below a certain standard. Like there isn't. It's solely looking at the total, the class interactions between the high class. So it doesn't really even treat of people who were, say, from a lower class and then were bred into an upper one or whatnot. It was solely dictated on these people, and you could just see from them like, okay, these are just people. These are just people. But it did get me thinking, what role does social class play in my own life, and I suppose of others and nowadays? I live in Brisbane. I live in a medium-sized city, a large but medium-sized city as well. In when you compare it to the world, there's rich people in my city for sure, but I personally just don't see, I guess, that sort of interaction, that sort of community in my own place of birth and where I live. And this could just be because I'm not observing it. Maybe I need to go more out into the city or certain locations, and there I would find like, oh no, you can't enter into here, Mr. Down, because your family connections aren't good enough. You're not wealthy enough. Things like that. So maybe I'm just being a little bit oblivious to it. And I'm certain there are neighborhoods, there are places where rich people congregate and people of the higher class congregate. But I personally just don't see it much in my day-to-day life. And I can't say I've ever been particularly influenced or snobbed in a way by someone from a higher class or even a lower class. And I suppose like I would see more of the lower class just from where my family is from, where I grew up. It has a reputation for being bogans, a Logan bogan. But I don't particularly feel that as well. And, I certainly hope I don't treat people differently based on their class. I might do it based on their actions and the way they speak and interact with people. If I see, a lady, smacking her kids or yelling at her kids and being a very emotional sort of, unthinking sort of person, yes, I'm going to treat them differently, and I'm probably not going to be that impressed by it. But is that a reflection of social class, or is that a reflection of their own actions in the world? And I guess, well, okay, does that social class where they come up from, how much of an influence does that have versus what's the influence of that versus the influence of their parents or the influence of their friends? So it's just interesting thinking about these sorts of things. And I personally don't see it, and I would love some feedback if there actually is an upper class in Brisbane, the socialites or whatever scene. I'm sure there probably is some, but it's definitely not something that I think plays a big role in my life and would even influence my life at all. So that, talking about that, I mentioned just before about duty and obligation and mixing that with love. So we see that Newland has a really almost platonic relationship with May. It's quite funny in the book, like reading it, she comes across as a really genuinely great partner. She's, well-bred, she's pretty, she's, she's thoughtful in some ways and intelligent in some ways, but also you get this underlying negative feeling from her, from Archer, which is that she can't think for herself. Everything she does is dictated by the social rules and interactions that her family has sort of grown her up with and she's learned. And she can't even conceptualize going outside of these social norms. And, she's meant to only vacation with her parents to this certain place. And so when Archer is pushing to go to somewhere else, Newland Archer, she says like, oh no, like we can't really do that. And we need to think about what my family would say and things like that. So it's just funny seeing how, someone who does seem like a really good person and almost like a perfect match for him, he rejects based on this basically like one point, which is that she is almost like an automaton. She doesn't have that inner personality, that vibrancy that Ellen does, her cousin. And so he goes into a certain mode where he's just falling in love with Ellen, getting further and further deeper into this love of her. And I guess it got me thinking, would Newland have had a more meaningful life with Ellen, a better life, a more joyful life? And, giving it some thought, I really don't think he would have. I think if he had gone with her and sort of eloped to Japan, as he was suggesting, or just escaped away with her, forgetting all the social interactions, forgetting all these things, she, who is older than him and has sort of experienced this before once, was basically saying, like, look, just because this happens, we're still going to have the same problems. Like, you're still going to feel it, and there's no necessary, it's like love isn't just the only thing in life. You do actually have to think of these obligations, and where is money going to come from? What are you going to do if your family cuts you off? And you can see that she thinks about this a lot, and she is the one almost driving the relationship from not doing that, because at certain points he is prepared to give 100%, but Ellen will cool off or move away or take a decision to actually go back to her abusive husband that she previously has had, to not go through with the divorce. And you can just see that I think she's a little bit more grounded in life, and she understands that just because you're in love with someone and feel this intense love, it doesn't mean that your life is going to be better because of that and following that. So it got me questioning my own balance between following passions and duty as well. This is something we talk about a lot here on Mere Mortals, about following your passion and making something from it. If you're unsatisfied with your work, with your relationships, with whatever it is, I would say a strong underlying theme that comes from both myself and Juan is that you should follow your passions. And while I agree with that, it did get me thinking, you know what, I probably need to backtrack a little bit with that, because what has allowed me to follow my passions now, which is, the podcasting, doing book reviews, interviewing people, what allows me to be in that position was that I grinded away for 3 years in a job I didn't particularly love. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. And, I put in the hard work, I put in time, and I saved up money, and I intentionally don't spend that much money in other places, which has allowed me the freedom now to actually go after my passion. So I can't just recommend to everyone, just go and do that. And if people were coming to asking me for advice, I probably would be saying, like, look, there is benefits to be gained by, maybe just putting that to the side, maybe that being your passion, being that just that little hobby that you have, that you do in your free time, that you can spend whenever you have the time spare to free for it, go after it. But don't just fully dive into it without thinking of the consequences of money, of family obligations, of your own position in life and who depends on you, and all sorts of things like that. So this book was just a good reminder of that I shouldn't just be saying things like that. I should also temper that with the other side of the coin, which is sometimes you have to do shit you don't want to do. And you know what? That's actually life, and that's life for a lot of people as well. The final one was just, is intense love sustainable? Can you keep up with that fire, that energy, that immense desire? And it's a tricky one, because love is, I feel, a really undefined term. And I dislike using it myself, because I think it means so many different things to so many different people that it makes it tricky to talk about it. And it can get confused with lust quite often as well, I think. So it just got me thinking, like, was the relationship that Newland had with Ellen, was that sustainable, or was that heightened because there was such a distance between them? In the book, he really only sees her maybe 6 or 7 times intimately, as in on their own together. And he's created this full thing in his head of just how much he loves her, how life would be perfect with her if he escaped, how, I suppose, not much of the book, and this is actually a good point that I'm just came to my head right now. Most of the book he spends complaining or judging his relationship with May in a negative light, and not particularly saying how being with Ellen would actually make things so much better. So just because you're sort of discontented in one way, doesn't mean that because you have a glimmer of hope somewhere else, that's going to be the thing that makes your life intensely beautiful and that's what's going to make it all better. And you can see he goes through sort of like 3 months, years without seeing Ellen, without even seeing her, without communicating with her. And yet this desire, this love that he has for her is still so intense. And I question whether that actually is true or whether he has almost deluded himself, thought himself into thinking something that really isn't true, that he hasn't thought through enough, that what would be the intricate details of eloping with this other woman, getting cut off with his family, and then 3 years down the track when he has no money, he's never worked really hard in his life, and he's realizing, oh, I've got 2 kids and a third on the way. How am I going to support them? I don't think he's really thought about that. So, that just finding that balance between duty and love. And would Newland have had a more meaningful life with Ellen? I personally don't think so. I think he, even though almost involuntarily, he stuck with the path which, while not the most satisfying in the short term, potentially was the most satisfying in the long term. So just something to think about there. Which gets onto my own personal observations. So number one is just the rapidly changing norms. So in this epoch, this era, divorce was still a hugely frowned upon thing. You don't divorce someone, it was probably like the divorce rate was 5%, 2%, something like that. And the implications of divorcing someone were huge for widows, for those people, the women who had initiated a divorce were seen as, I guess, like morally questionable. There was something about them that you wouldn't want to associate with, and this ties into the whole class thing as well. Maybe it was related to only the lower class divorce, because it's sort of like that almost means that you made a mistake, and we're the high and tidy, the rich and mighty, we don't make mistakes. Who knows? But it was interesting seeing that, and divorce is just so acceptable nowadays that it just makes me wonder, what other norms that are unacceptable now will change in 10, 15 years, and how will I personally associate with them? And just a fun little thing to think about. I enjoy the book more when I identify with the character as well. I definitely saw large parts of my own personality in Newland Archer, his sort of thinking, his obvious handsomeness and well-bredness. But no, in all seriousness, there was more aspects of him that I associated with, which was really funny and made the book so much more enjoyable, because my previous book review, which I did on Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence, treats of very similar things. It's got a love triangle in it. The main character, has to decide between the more passionate but sort of unloving one, this other person, and then there's family obligations with his mother comes into the picture. It ties in quite nicely with this book in terms of the themes and the age that it's set in, and I guess like the overall subject matter. But I really just found Sons and Lovers quite boring. But this book captured my attention. The Age of Innocence, I found much more enjoyable. I actually was intrigued by it. I was enjoying it. And it just got me thinking. I think it was mostly because I identified with the character more. Newland Archer, I just saw lots of myself in him. Whereas with Paul Morrell in The Sons and Lovers, I just didn't feel that connection. I didn't understand why he thought the things he did and why he acted the way he did. My last little comment here, and this is a fun one, is if I ever do commentary on dramas, on social topics that are sort of like insightful and just full of drama, especially of famous people or anything like that, I want you to remember this moment and never listen to me again, because it's just, I find that just so useless that if I have ever converted the channel into something like that, where it's me talking about, what Nicki Minaj is doing, who the Kardashians are keeping up with nowadays, if I do talk about that, I would strongly suggest that I've gone down a seriously wrong route, and it's really not worth listening to me. So there you go. That's a little recommendation, a pledge from Kyron. Don't listen to me if I do that. So in summary, the book was surprisingly enjoyable. I really didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. So I'm giving it a solid 6.5 out of 10. The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. What's something pragmatic I'm going to take from it? Well, I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time observing if social class actually dictates my actions in the day-to-day life. Do I treat people differently based on whether I know they're from a certain area, a certain class, a certain whatever it is? And I think it would just be interesting keeping my eye out on that for a little bit and see, because maybe I could just get my eyes open and be like, oh, wow, Kyron, you're actually speaking with people a lot differently based on that, or you're treating people differently. And I think it would be better for the world in general if I didn't do that. So if I am, it's probably something I need to change. And that's it. That's another book review done and dusted. So I hope you enjoyed this. I would recommend checking out some of Juan's book reviews as well. He's starting to put a bit out more, and he's following a similar format to me. So if you like my reviews, you'll probably like his. Other than that, you'll just notice a running theme between what I think about in here and what I talk about on the podcast as well. So if you enjoy, I guess, my style of analyzing things, you probably would get some benefit from checking out the podcast. You can do that on YouTube or wherever you find podcasts under the Mere Mortals brand. You're already listening to this, so you'd probably find it. You already know where we're at. So that's it for today. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and give me any commentary if you feel like it. If not, that's also totally cool. I'm leaving it there. Kyron out.